everybody, man. I'm so excited that you are on with me on Strong Inspirations. My brothers and sisters out there, I can feel you watching me. And you know I'm jamming. If you've been watching me since the beginning, you know I'm getting so much good content with these people who are coming on the channel. And the thing about it is actually becoming a little easier finding people because I got a little ear to the ground. There are people out there who've been watching me, who've been guests to say, I got a story. And I'm just thinking more intellectually for what I want to present to you, my brothers and sisters. And I got a guy on the channel tonight. He's a good-looking guy. He gonna come with some deep stuff. Watch. This gonna be deep. I'm telling you, he gonna go deep on you with some mental kind of thing of how this mental stuff is working in America from a Black history perspective. And also what's so special about him coming on the channel right now is because it's in recognition of Tulsa, Oklahoma 100th, and I don't like to call the word anniversary, but for lack of a better word, let's go with anniversary of what happened during the massacre, what happened during the massacre 100 years ago in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street. Now, I know you, my brothers and sisters, you watching this channel, I know you know about that story. Maybe not the whole bit, and he's gonna give you a little bit more insight. And there's some other videos on the channel that talk about it. So if you don't know, watch those. The other thing that I want you to do before I bring him on is I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. It's free. All you do is once this is over, hit the subscribe button. It don't ask for no information. It just makes me feel better. Thank you. I want you to like this video because he's going to put something on your mind for something you to think about. Like this video. I want you to hit the notifications bell. When the videos come up, you get a ding and you can be the first to watch it. And you can run around telling everybody you a strong inspiration man and a strong inspiration woman. And then I want you to tell somebody about strong inspiration. Don't keep this to yourself, please. Let this go viral. Share this with folks. The other thing I want you to do on a personal note, and you all might know I'm a filmmaker. I'm serious about it. I got this documentary called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. And it talks about how slaves went to college, what racists did to destroy Black business districts, which is really a good lead into our guest, because it does talk about Tulsa, but it mentions other districts, things that happened throughout our history, not just with riots, as they want to call them riots, with massacres, but also with them highways. They built them highways right through the districts. That's in my movie and so much more. It's streaming on Amazon. The other thing, and you're gonna love this, I want you to read my book. Don't just watch the videos, read my book, and it's an easy read. It covers similar to the movie, but it has more facts. I don't give you no commentary because I'm not trying to dilute or enhance what the fact is. I just give it to you as I say to you, straight, no chasing. So I love for you to read my book, and I'll give you an autograph, which, you know, hey, one day that might mean something if I keep going in this game, and I'm going to do that. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, my friends. So I want you to read my book too, please. And it's also available on Amazon, but you can actually go directly to my website, businessintheblack.net. All right, so please do that for me. I really appreciate it. And so without further ado, I'm gonna have this guy come on. He's been sitting there, he's smiling, he's nodding, he's saying, hey, I got to go. I got to tell a story because I got something to put on your mind. So, sir, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let's get it on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brogdon. I'm Calvin Schermerhorn, a professor of history at Arizona State University. And I'm glad you're talking about Black businesses, because that's where the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre really starts.
Okay, hold on, stop. I don't mean no disrespect to you. You're a professor and you teach history where?
Arizona State University.
And how do you like history that much to want to make that your career, to teach history every day? How did you get involved?
I can't think of doing anything else. But I grew up in Southern Maryland, in a place that liked to forget its past and whitewash its past. And waking up to that as a student in the 1980s and 1990s, I started to make that my calling, my profession. And so I'm very fortunate to be able to teach in Arizona State University's School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies.
Now, when you teach history, was there ever, and I guess this is an easy question, maybe, was there a ha-ha moment to make you say, ha-ha, there's something that somebody else said that I found a little different through my research and whatnot?
Well, originally it's reading Frederick Douglass. And that is that growing up in Maryland, you could be forgiven for not knowing that Maryland and the entire Chesapeake was a cradle of slavery in America, a cradle of racism in America, because people didn't want to remember that. They wanted to go back to the colonial era and say, well, this is a cradle of religious toleration, right? This is where civilization started. But when you actually look deep into the landscape, something else emerges. And that's something that's a path that Americans don't really want to follow. And now we've got legislation against teaching things like critical race theory, which I can help decipher and explain a little bit. That's actually putting in place a law against looking critically at this history. And this is juxtaposed with the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa race massacre.
Yeah. And so that's what we want to talk about today. What's your angle on that? What's go ahead.
Yeah, so let me start just briefly and remind your audience about the context here. Tulsa's Greenwood district was about 10,000. It was the wealthiest Black community in Oklahoma. About 1 in 8 Tulsans was African American, and Greenwood was home to 191 businesses, many of them Black owned. And we're not just talking about apparel shops and shoe shops, but also music shops, butcher shops, barber shops, billiard halls, mortuary, confectionery, hotels, restaurants, cafes, a movie theater. We're talking about 35 square blocks of mainly Black-owned businesses in a place in which economics was largely segregated. So there's a lot of prosperity, there's a lot of economic activity. And since there was a hard color line in this era of Jim Crow, immigrants to Oklahoma took it upon themselves to open the business and serve the community. You had doctors.
Let me stop it right there. How about this? I got a question for you. Why Tulsa? Why did Tulsa become that great city? Let me give you what I'm thinking, and you can chime in. I'm thinking because a lot of the Blacks moved that way because of the Indian connection. Maybe there's some there. I know there's some Blacks with the Indians, and also because some of them got some land with oil on it, and they got money that way.
Correct.
What's your rationale? Why Tulsa?
That's it. You're talking about the startup phase of the petroleum industry, and so you've got Black gold in Oklahoma, in this part of Oklahoma, and so once you've got that source of income, of economic prosperity, it attracts people. It attracts people like the Ragsdale family, originally enslaved in Texas, born in Arkansas. William Ragsdale was born in 1891, moved from Muskogee, Oklahoma, to Greenwood in the 1910s and set up the Ragsdale Mortuary Company, the Ragsdale Undertaking Company on 114 Greenwood Avenue, with his daughter-in-law Lydia, and his son Hartwell Ragsdale.
Okay.
So here's an example of people who said, there is an opportunity here in Tulsa, in Greenwood especially, we need a mortuary because cemeteries were segregated, mortuary facilities were
I got you.
segregated. There's a business niche, and he
Okay.
exploited.
Let me stop. Let me ask you this question. At what point, at what time did African Americans start arriving in Tulsa compared to when the riot happened? So how long did they have, like, we were living good there and then the thing went ugly that one night, 2 nights? How long
Yeah.
prior to that?
So the immigration to Tulsa really accelerated in the 19 teens, right before World War I. And so as the petroleum industry, as the gas industry took off, that's when it attracted the migrants, the people who looked to set up a business and a livelihood in Tulsa.
Okay, so they let's say they might have had 10 good years before that night.
Yeah, there was 10 good years of 10 boom years. Let's say that. 10 boom years of rapid expansion when you have doctors, Black doctors, professionals, lawyers, dentists, nurses coming into Tulsa responding to the economic opportunity.
Would the people have gotten to Tulsa from as far away as New York or Michigan, or was it more Texas, deep South?
Yeah.
Where did mostly they come from?
Mostly it was they were moving from other areas in the South, but there were migrants from other areas. There were people who would come from the East Coast seeking that opportunity, just like people were moving all over the country generally.
Okay.
This was a part of this was kind of analogous to the Great Migration that took off right around World War I.
Okay.
But you wouldn't think Oklahoma would be a place to move to. Well, it was a place to move to because here's where economic development was taking place.
Okay.
And so that's what attracted
when they got there, there was nothing that really deterred them initially from coming.
Well, there was and there wasn't, because at the time there was a very strict Jim Crow segregation of facilities. And so what actually sparked the riot, what actually sparked the massacre, was a young man named Dick Rowland,
Right.
who was working as a shoe shiner.
Right.
He was not allowed to use the bathrooms in the place where he was shining shoes. He had to go over to the Drexel building a few blocks over, ride the elevator all the way up to the top floor so that he could use the segregated facilities. In the process of getting in that elevator, he tripped and somehow encountered Sarah Page, the 17-year-old elevator operator, who probably knew him because he had to take the elevator up to go to the bathroom at least once a day.
Right.
She screamed, ran out of the elevator, and that was the spark that lit the tinderbox. So it's not as if, Greenwood was going along happily in a place that was permissive and sort of progressive. It was a place where you had Jim Crow, right, on the backs of every African-American member of that community. But that contrasted with the opportunity.
Okay,
what happened then?
Were there incidences of violence, lynching before that night? Or it just, if y'all stay over there, we're going to let y'all play it easy, that kind of thing?
Mostly that. It was one of those places where you do not, if you were African American, you do not go to certain places at certain times, right?
I got you.
But the violence was the everyday violence that was part of Jim Crow. It was that deference. It was hopping off the sidewalk when a white person came. It was not going the short way to church because you were going through a neighborhood that was not going to welcome you. You'd have to go the long way.
I got you.
But the thing about Greenwood was that it was an enclave of relative prosperity in a larger, lake of fire, if you like. But what happened after the incident with Dick Rowland was that this was the spark that those people, those white supremacists, jealous and unhappy about Black prosperity, used to rally around. This was the incident. The trigger was already set, if you like. But Black Tulsans rallied around Dick Rowland. They got him out of town. They made sure he wasn't going to be lynched. 25 armed veterans set up on the courthouse saying, absolutely not. We're not going to turn this into a lynching. 75 more. These are World War I veterans coming back from service, right?
Yeah.
They're joined. A total of about 100 Black veterans are out by the courthouse. And this was the spark that ignited the white supremacist backlash. That the shots were fired, and all of a sudden you've got a white rage, a mob that comes and burns 35 square blocks.
Right.
And I know your audience is probably familiar with the story, but it's worth reminding people that this involved aerial bombardment. That is, planes dropping dynamite onto Black buildings, Black businesses.
Yeah.
And so the Ragsdales, who I mentioned earlier, William Ragsdale lost his mortuary company, which went up in flames on Greenwood Avenue. And the property losses amounted to, at the time, about $1.8 million. You translate that into today's money, that's between 100 million and 170 million, if we think about it in terms of labor value or income value.
I got you.
So imagine $170 million worth of Black homes, businesses going up in flames today. And we don't know how many people the white mob massacred because so many people fled. And so many people were buried in hastily unmarked graves, hastily dug and covered up. There's reports of authorities taking people's film out of cameras, trying to prevent a record of this massacre being laid down for future use.
I got you. Now, when we and you talked offline, you said that there was some critical thinking behind all this. Let me ask you this. Prior to that night, and things were boiling over, were the white people just jealous of the Black people, of all that they had accomplished in some way? Were they themselves saying, man, their neighborhood is better than mine, they're doing more than I am? Was there some of that? I want my people to say, I wonder. How about that one?
Yeah, it's hard to say what's in the minds of individuals, but collectively there is a resentment at success. If your whole opinion of yourself, your whole perception of yourself is built on white supremacy, then you cannot have the fact of Black success existing when you also have an environment that gives permission to act violently based on those racist assumptions. And so we've seen this over and over again. It wasn't just 2 years before the Elaine massacre in Arkansas erupted over Black labor organizing. The 1919 Chicago massacre targeted Black workers. The East St. Louis massacre of 1917 killed about 100 Black residents of East St. Louis. The 1910 Slocum massacre in Texas targeted Black businesses. The 1906 Atlanta massacre targeted Black property owners. The 1898 Wilmington massacre in North Carolina was white supremacists that could not stand that there was a government that was formed in cooperation between Black and white office holders.
Yeah.
You can go back to the 1887 Thibodaux massacre in Louisiana that killed over 60 sugarcane workers after they tried to unionize with the Knights of Labor. We go back to 1873 and the Colfax massacre killed over 100 African Americans who were part of the results of a disputed election.
Yeah.
We go back to the Memphis massacre of 1866 targeting Black businesses. Yeah.
Is some of that, can you just boil that down to jealousy?
It's not simply jealousy. It's the entitlement of some people to think that if they have not risen, right, by the content of their character and their exertions, that they are entitled to destroy, to harm those people whom they consider themselves superior to. So it's a whole complex of white entitlement and a hostility that says my being is not founded on my contest of who's the better, who's the harder worker, the more fortunate, that sort of thing. The contest is over race and resentment. Yeah. So if that sounds familiar, it's because it is.
Yeah. Now it's funny. Well, not funny, but okay. So Okay, you enslave us, you beat us down, you don't want us to get an education, you don't want us to marry, have families, and all that. And this is a deep question that just popped in my head. So how do you have sex with my women?
Yeah. So this is
If you don't
another
mind, I ask you, what's the mindset on that? You hate me, but you can have sex with my women.
one of the deeply tragic artifacts of or processes of racism going back to slavery, going back 400 years till the 1600s, is that enslavers did two things by creating race, by acting on racial assumptions. They seek to dehumanize people of African descent. By the same token, they have to recognize the humanity of those same people. So that's the push and pull, the violence and the humanity of it, because they have to recognize at some level that the interaction is between two human beings, and that in many cases happened during the process you described, whether it's Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, right, or any of the myriad uh, children born uh, with Black women and white fathers.
Yeah, because I mean, there are stories where the father, the white father, did give his children of the Black woman some additional benefits. And
Yeah,
then there, I'm sure that like everything, there's nothing is gray and white, as they say. But there are many stories like that. They allowed this
absolutely.
guy, the son, to take over his business, to teach him extra skills,
Yeah.
so on and so forth, and still had some other people that he just despised to the nth degree.
Oh, absolutely. And if I mean the stories come out of American history. The one I was just researching recently was one of the richest men in Virginia in about 1749, 1748, was John Custis IV, and he owned about 200 enslaved people. He also had a son, John Custis V, whom he called Jack, by an enslaved woman named Alice, whom he enslaved for many years. He tried very hard to set Jack up with 250 acres of property, a well-furnished house, livestock and clothes, enslaved servants. He even said, well, you're going to have to be the owner of your mother now when you go free. So
Wow.
he tried very hard to do that. Um, the laws of Virginia wouldn't let him do it, and Jack died before he turned 20 and could take possession of that property. So yeah, there's stories of this, right? And at the same time, here's Jack Custis. Here are 200 other enslaved people of African descent, and so you've got those tensions, right?
Yeah.
Because he was family.
What? And then how do you rationalize that through religion?
Well, yeah. So there's another aspect of it, right?
Yes.
Which is how do you do this? Many people said, well, we have to appeal to a theology that puts race into the practice of slavery and racial superiority. And so this really happened, and I'm kind of paraphrasing Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, where you have a theology of race that says, well, African descended people are biblically the descendants of Ham, right? And the whites are the descendants of Noah's other sons. And so once we have a biblical justification, then we can start, giving divine sanction to racism. So this is just one way of doing it. Others, like Thomas Jefferson, thought it was more scientific and biological. So you can have religiously inspired racism, scientifically inspired racism. Um, I don't know what the particular orientation of the perpetrators of the Tulsa massacre were, but they probably didn't need a lot of elegant theorizing in order to do what they did. Because what is really powerful in America in the 20th century is the economics. It's the economics of racism. It's the economics of white supremacy, because here we have 100 years, or hundreds of years of slavery, and then we have a couple of generations of freedom. And remember, in 1921, there are still many people around who remember the ancestors who were enslaved. There are still a few ancestors who were enslaved. And so what we have there is a pattern of theft of Black income, a pattern of theft of Black bodies
Right.
that really was foundational to the colonial and early American experience. But by now, by 1921, you have what was unimaginable a generation before, which is a wealthy enclave of professional African American business people who are participating in the American dream of home ownership, of business ownership. And this makes them vulnerable in a society in which the rights are not protected. The process, the political process, does not see them as citizens so much as people who are kind of excluded from the interests of the polity.
Have you seen a letter, some document where a guy says, "I know I'm wrong, but I can't help it. I know this isn't what I should be doing, but I have to do it." And another part of that, and if I don't conform to this, I'm under some personal threat myself from others who would treat me like I love Black people, I'm an abolitionist or something like that. Have you seen document like that?
Yes, there are many interesting documents that say something like that. One of the more famous ones that I keep coming back to is when Abraham Lincoln, as president in the 1860s, met with Black leaders. He met with Frederick Douglass. He met with some African American church and community leaders at the White House, and he said, I get it, right? We need to abolish slavery, but I also don't think that Black and white people can live together in this country. And maybe it would be a good idea if African Americans decided to think about maybe leaving the United States. Frederick Douglass had heard this argument over and over for a dozen years, and he'd been arguing against it for a dozen years, saying, actually, I was born here. So were my parents. So was my mother, grandmother, grandfather, going back several generations. And so he said, I can no more, leave America as if I were a foreigner than anybody else, and especially because most African descended people had been there longer, had been in the United States longer than so many recently arrived Europeans who arrived, step off the boat, claim a little bit of white entitlement, right?
I got you.
And participate in that. And so when those leaders maybe nodded politely when Abraham Lincoln said this, but it was an impossibility. And so what should have happened was the onus should have been on people like Lincoln to say, actually, you don't need to change so much. Social attitudes need to change. We need to stop assuming there's separate and unequal and that there's some sort of inherent conflict. Let's do the hard work of cooperating.
It's kind of ironic. After Lincoln did the best he could do, how long was it? 2 weeks after that guy shot him as he was in the theater? Was there a lot of sentiment for people saying, let's kill Lincoln at the time?
Oh, yeah. Yes. There was a lot of sentiment for killing Lincoln at the time, especially you've got the defeated Confederacy that's kind of laid down its arms, but isn't really changing its heart. That is that the Confederates lost their project of building an enslavers' republic, but they didn't lose that white entitlement, that white supremacy to say that actually they were right. So we see this during Reconstruction, again, going back to the Memphis Massacre of 1866, the New Orleans Massacre of 1866, the Colfax Massacre of 1873, where every time you had African Americans saying, we would like to preserve we hold these truths to be self-evident. We would like our rights. We would like to defend them. We would like to vote, become part of the political process. We're not asking anybody to give up anything except an entitlement that says you're better than I am and that you deserve what I've earned. That didn't happen. And so again, from the Reconstruction violence to the 1921 Tulsa massacre, you have this theme that plays out over and over again, where every time Black business owners, Black people amass a little bit of property, a little bit of prosperity, there's somebody there to claim that. There's some white person there that says that's illegitimate. I'm gonna hold you back one way or another.
Yeah. Let me, as we kind of come to a close, let me ask you this: how strongly could a person be to be an abolitionist? How can you put your life on the line as an abolitionist? Like, let's say, for example, John Brown. Mm-hmm. What's his mindset to say, I'm going to die for some Black people? And I know he faced that many times in his dailies going on.
Yeah.
People throughout Kansas really felt for him, and then he became a big, let's say, star as he did. How does somebody become that kind of guy?
John Brown was exceptional in many ways. You might call him a religious fanatic. He certainly wasn't a very likable character or likable subject. He was kind of like an Old Testament patriarch. So to the person that said that Black people are descendants of Ham, he said, utter nonsense. We're all God's creation. We're all children of the living God, and I will defend that truth that I know, with all the firepower I have. And so, yes, John Brown was, maybe he was acting on the side of the angels, but he was certainly very violent. He was certainly very, he had the courage of his convictions. One way or another. You might call him a terrorist. You might call him a hero. But I want to circle back around to the Ragsdale family, because I think this is important. That is, after Greenwood burned, after the massacre happened in 1921, the district didn't ever return to the prosperity that it had before. Something essential was destroyed. Now, Greenwood was rebuilt, and there was a vibrant Black community. But then you have people like Hartwell Ragsdale, young Hartwell Ragsdale, and then his brother was born a few years later, Lincoln Ragsdale. They got out of Oklahoma. They moved to Phoenix, and they found that even in this new place, this new city in the desert, where there hadn't been slavery before, there hadn't been the baggage of Oklahoma, they still faced it. Jim Crow set up shop in Phoenix by the time Lincoln and Hartwell Ragsdale arrived to open a mortuary company. When they did, they couldn't get a bank loan, so they had to get a private loan. When the mortuary company was successful, Lincoln Ragsdale wanted to move into a white neighborhood. He had to purchase the home through a straw buyer. He had to enter by the back gate to inspect the property in Encanto and Phoenix. And then when he and his family moved in, they got stopped out in front of their house by police. They had crosses burning on the lawn. People vandalized their property. And so this happened, this didn't end in 1921, of course, and we know this, right? Yeah. But the process is iterative. And so theft in one generation begets theft in the next generation. And so when we talk about things like critical race theory, and then we've got the Oklahoma law, HB/SB 1775, that tries to stop teachers and college professors from teaching critical race theory in these classes, this is trying to shut down the history, shut down an understanding of what enabled this process that we've been talking over a long range of history, from slavery all the way up until the recent history. And in critical race theory isn't some, Marxist, some Marxist framework of like distorting reality. This was actually a legal theory that grew up in the 1980s and 1990s that said you have law, but law doesn't operate by itself. It operates by process of human intention. And when you put racism together with legal structures, you get systematic racism, you get structural racism. And so, in the writings of Kimberly Crenshaw and people like Derek Bell, right? These are some theorists that talk about this. We talk about structural racism in economics. We think about William Sandy Darity and Derek Hamilton, who theorize this. There's lots of people whose ideas I'm incorporating here in our discussion. But
Right.
what we really need to think about as we mark this 100th anniversary is,
Right.
what are the meanings we can take away from it?
Right.
Right? How do we understand this? And if there's laws being passed across the country that say, no, we will not discuss things like systemic structural racism, what we tend to do is risk going back to that place in 1921 where people thought, well, if it's all about resentment, if it's all about who I think I am and what I'm entitled to, and we don't think structurally about it, well, where can we go, right?
Right.
Is this going to happen again? And so that's I think it's something to think about.
At the end of the day, though, and we can go back in history all the way back to the beginning of time. Good wins, I believe. And when I say good, I have to, as I do believe, I say God wins. So no matter what all that happened in that massacre, and it was truly not good, under no pretense, good still wins somehow. The people lost their lives, no question. But I think at the end of the day, there are people who, like yourself, who will tell these stories, who will make it plain for everybody, which is a part of that good wins theory that I have.
Good wins, but in the meantime, there can be lots of suffering and setbacks.
Oh yeah, there's no question.
Right? Whether it's 40 years in the desert, look what happened to the apostles, right?
Right.
Did they live happy, contented lives? Good wins, but it's often, it's often born in struggle, and the good that comes from it is that good that's born in struggle. I think you're right.
Yeah. Who would have? I guess they never would have thought the Berlin Wall was going to come down. You know what I mean? Right. And eventually, good wins, and that wall had to come down.
Yeah, but I agree. But there's also a process, right?
Yeah.
So you think, okay, if good winning is victory in the Civil War and the emancipation of 4 million people from slavery, but then what happened a generation later?
Yes.
With violent Jim Crow.
Yeah.
Right. We often go back to Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. Good wins, right? But then what happens a generation or two later? What if banning critical race theory means that I can no longer teach a letter from a Birmingham jail? What if I can no longer teach what Dr. Martin Luther King said about systemic structural racism?
Yes.
It's hard to see the good coming out, right?
Yes.
But as you say, good wins, then we'll have to redouble the struggle.
Yes. I thank you so very much for coming on the show, everybody. I told you he was going to be deep, and I couldn't believe it. And he answered some of them questions I had for him. He said, I'm going to give it to you. I ain't scared to tell this stuff. This is what we do on Strong Inspirations. I give it to you straight, no chaser, and I let them tell the story. I just try to come up with a question. Everybody hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on this video, because he told you something and he told me something that I did not know. Into that critical thinking part of our minds. Hit the notification bell, tell somebody about the channel. Do you have a book out or something like that? If I may ask, a website where people can follow you, whatever.
Yeah. You can Google Calvin Schermerhorn, Schermerhorn, Arizona State University. My last book came out a couple of years ago, was called Unrequited Toil, A History of United States Slavery.
Okay.
My next book in the works now is called is called The Plunder of Black America: How the Racial Wealth Gap Was Made and Why It's Growing.
Woo, boy, oh boy. Everybody, we're going to put it in the description about his books and his website and everything. I thank you so very much for being on the channel again. And so I say to you in closing, with all sincerity, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind, because we love what you're doing and making us think and telling it like it is from another perspective. We sure appreciate you. We have a good day. Bye-bye. We out.
Pleasure. Thank you.